Well, great to see you this weekend all across Northway, wherever you're worshiping. Welcome to you. I'm excited to dive into the second week of this series. I'm curious which of these two categories you fall into when it comes to talking about the enemy in the shadows, the devil, Satan, this idea of spiritual warfare even, and demons and these types of things. So a quote from C.S. Lewis. He passed away 50 years ago this weekend, actually on the same day as JFK. And read a quote here from the preface to his Screwtape Letters. He says this: "There are two equal and opposite errors into which our race can fall about the devils. One is to believe in their existence, the other is to believe and to feel an excessive and unhealthy interest in them." What's your reaction to that? Which category do you fall into? For some of us, we're in the category where we disbelieve in the existence of an enemy in the shadows. So the series is, frankly, making you a bit uncomfortable. We wonder if we really can, in such a day and age with all that we know, science and technology, can we really believe in something as superstitious and as old-fashioned and ancient as demons and angels and this unseen world and an enemy named Satan? Isn't that something that should be reserved for books and movies with Keanu Reeves, right? Today, if you struggle with believing in the existence of an enemy, I'm going to argue this very simply. Your enemy is real. He knows how to attack and retreat. He is powerful, but also predictable, limited in power, and lacking authority. You see, on one hand, if you're in this group, I want you to understand that Jesus not only believes that Satan and demons are real, but he interacts with them frequently. In the Gospel of Luke, we have an author who's a scientist, a historian, and a doctor. And like most scientists and historians, we can assume a couple things, right? He's probably boring and not that much fun to be around. Come on, who's going to argue with that? But he also knows his stuff. And so when he writes what happens in the life of Jesus, you can be sure that Luke has researched it. He's talked to all the eyewitnesses. He knows what really happened. And in the Gospel of Luke, we have 10 confrontations between Jesus Christ and Satan or demons. 10 of them. In the Gospel of Mark, we have 13 healings that happen where Jesus heals another person, and the majority of those healings are all related to something that Satan has done in that person's life that has caused them to be healed, caused them to need to be healed. And then Matthew and John, they carry the same weight as well. If you're trying to find out who Jesus is and what he believes about Satan from his perspective, all you have to do is just look at how many times he talks about Satan versus other enemies that might be around in his time. If you count them all up, Herod, Pontius Pilate, Caesar, the Pharisees or Sadducees, even sinful men and women, none of them are outweighed by how many times Jesus talks about Satan. In fact, if you add all of them together, they still don't add up to the same amount that he talks about Satan and demons and this idea of an enemy in the shadows. When Jesus talks about Satan in the scriptures, there's 22 different names for the Satan, for our enemy in the shadows. And Jesus uses 8 of them. 8 of them. And some of them are unique to him. He calls him the devil, which literally means a slanderer. He calls him Beelzebub, which means the Lord of the Flies or the Lord of Dung. I'm not going to touch that. He calls him the wicked one. He calls him the enemy. He calls him Satan, which means an adversary. He calls him a liar. He calls him a murderer. And he calls him the prince of this world. On your own time, you can read those references and you can study who Jesus, as God, believed our enemy and his enemy in the shadows to be. It's clear. There is an enemy. So for those of you today who fall into this disbelief category, you like Jesus, you tolerate the church, but this talk about the devil, I don't know. Well, Jesus talked about the devil an awful lot, and he interacted with him an awful lot. So I'd like to challenge you today to lay your beliefs down with this question: is it possible that you are missing out on a spiritual reality that could actually bring you and your family spiritual freedom? I also want to stretch some of you that are in the other group, that are in the other direction, because perhaps you are a bit on the unhealthy and excessive side. I want to stretch you because, again, looking at Jesus, we don't see Jesus making far-fetched statements declaring that every single thing that we experience in life is from our enemy. Jesus doesn't come in into conflict with every person and every single time reference the work of Satan in their life. He doesn't explain every single sickness that he heals as having been evidence of Satan's power over that person's life. And he encounters thousands of people, and he teaches hundreds of sermons, and yet the enemy in the shadows is not a conversation in every single one of them. You see, this side of Jesus teaches us our need to maybe reel in our practice a bit and be sure that while battling against the realities that we believe to be true about our enemy, we don't obsess over him and lose the focus on the realities of the shadow of the cross and that we have victory over our enemy. And so if you're in that second group, I want to challenge you with this statement. Your enemy is real. He knows how to attack and retreat. He is powerful, but now I want you to listen. But he's also predictable. He's limited in power. And he is lacking authority. See, if you're in that second group, your focus needs to be on those but statements. He's real, he attacks, he retreats, he's powerful. You've got that down. But he's also limited and he lacks authority in our life. He's not behind every single thing. He's powerful, but he's not that powerful. And he has absolutely no authority. Every sickness, every problem at work, every setback, every disagreement, every financial struggle is not an attack of Satan. Sometimes our kids don't wash their hands at preschool, and we get sick. Sometimes we struggle at work because we're not doing a good job. Sometimes we've made a bad decision and we have to bear the consequences. Sometimes we've allowed dysfunction into our relationships. Sometimes we aren't wise with our money. Is the enemy happy about these things? Absolutely. Will he use them? Absolutely. Has he created every single one of them? No. Has he created some of them? Absolutely. There's a balance here. So wherever you are on this spectrum of belief, this week and next, we're really going to unpack one key word that I put in that description, that Satan is predictable. He's predictable. And we'll be talking about these 4 different words. I'm using 2 of them this week, discouragement and distraction. Next week, Pastor Kent will move on to doubt and deception. Our enemy is predictable. The first temptation that happens is in Genesis, and it is really no different than the temptation that happens to Jesus Christ that we see in the Gospels when Jesus is in the wilderness, and it's really not that different from the temptations that we face in our life every single day. His tactics are discouragement, distraction, doubt, and deception. He is incredibly predictable. Can I ask you to do something right now? If you're taking notes, I want you to get your pen and your notes out, okay? And if you're following along electronically, just have a way to write something down, write it on your phone, your iPad, however you're taking notes, following along in your app, okay? I want you to write down the answer to 2 questions. Number 1, write down a place in your life where do you have discouragement? Go ahead, begin to write it right now. Where do you have discouragement in your life? A place where maybe your expectations are not being met. A place where you're feeling a bit helpless, tired, lost. A place where you fear you may have made a mistake. A place where you're uncomfortable. A place where you lack provision. Where you aren't sure if somebody cares. You aren't being recognized. You lack control. You aren't being protected. Some of y'all are like, stop, okay? I already had one. Now I'm really discouraged. Just choose one. Okay? Everybody got it? All right, now I want you to write down a place in your life where you have a distraction. Where are you distracted? What's something in your life that's distracting you right now? Come on, write it down. A place where if there's a prize, your eyes aren't on it. A place where there's sideways energy away from the things that matter to you most. A place where you've lost focus, you've lost track, a place where you're focused on something superficial or gaining back power or gaining back control that you lost, a place where you don't have comfort, where you're not being recognized, a place where you know you're being selfish or prideful or short-sighted, a place where your priorities are totally out of line. And see, now some of you are discouraged, okay? Just write it down. Where's a place in your life where you feel distracted? Okay, do you have them? All right, we're going to come back to those. First, a story. I have an enemy in the shadows at home. I do. About 2 weeks ago, I was getting out of the shower. In fact, I think we have a picture of that. No, I'm just kidding. I'm getting out of the shower, and I'm drying off. And I wrap my towel around myself, and, while I'm brushing my teeth and all that kind of stuff, getting ready for the day. Our house is old, 103 years old, to be exact. So we use electric plug-in heaters to kind of warm ourselves and take the chill out of the morning, basically for 6 months of the year. So I reached the heater to shut it off, and I reached the light switch to shut it off, and I began to walk out of our bathroom. And next to our bathroom is our bedroom, and there's a huge old archway. It's about 2 feet thick. And as I walk through this archway, the oldest of the Blue Life Cohen, 6.5 years old, jumps out and says, "Boo!" And I scream like one of Pastor Kent's little girls. I mean, I just jump up in the air. I am so scared. He totally got me. As I jump up in the air, my towel falls off, and this is what Seinfeld calls bad naked, right? Now, you'd think that moment would have scarred Cohen so much by seeing his father like that he would never dream of doing it again. But the next day, there he was, enemy lurking in the shadows, right? And I don't have my game on. I'm not even in the coffee yet, right? So I shut the heater off. I turn the light off. All right, I walk through the archway. Boo! Ah! Right? Everything all over again. All right. The next morning, I'm like, I will not be bested by my child that I brought into this world. And so I got it down, right? And I know his rhythm. I know he's listening for the heater and he's watching for the lights. I shut the heater off. I shut the light off, grab my wife's towel, and I sneak up to the archway, and I throw it around the corner. I'm like, ah! Nobody there. Must have slept in. I walk through our bedroom, into our office where my closet is, walk around the corner in the archway into the closet. Boo! There he is. My enemy has adapted. He's gotten very wise, okay? So all I'm doing on day 4 is strategizing. I'm up early, the coffee's in, I'm using my masters, I got diagrams out. I am going to beat my kid, okay? I'm not going to lose. And so here's what I do. I turn the lights on, I turn on the heat, I put my towel next to the shower just like where it always is, and I turn the shower on, I stay in my pajamas, and I tiptoe and I hide under my bed. Yep. And sure enough, my little enemy comes tiptoeing down the stairs. He goes to his little hiding place. I wait about 30 seconds. I just jump out, ah! And he's done. I mean, just completely undone by this. Tears begin to well up inside. He screams like a little girl. I'm like, yeah, mission accomplished. I got him. Some of you think I'm a terrible father. I'm just building character, okay? Some of you, before you even get dressed in the morning, are getting defeated by your enemy that's lurking in the shadows. Maybe you're screaming, maybe you're crying, but you will not defeat him until we as a church and you as a son or daughter of Jesus Christ learn to shine some light in those shadows, to study your enemy, to strategize and secure a victory that has actually already been accomplished on your behalf. I want to look at the temptation of Jesus Christ really quickly. You'll be able to dive into this all on your own. People a lot smarter than me with many more initials after their name have studied this. This is not the intent of looking at this passage about the temptation of Jesus Christ. There's great books out there. You can study all about it, all that's going on, all the things going on. I'm just going to talk about it today to look at the simple idea that Jesus was tempted. It's not that different from the temptation in the garden, and it's not that different from the temptation that we face every single day. All 3 of these temptations that the enemy gives to Jesus are direct frontal attacks. He's clearly attacking him. And in every one of them, Jesus meets the attack with Scripture and pushes right back. And every single time, do you know what Jesus does? He quotes from Deuteronomy all 3 times. Do you think that's an accident? Do you think God has mistakes? No. It's completely intentional. Deuteronomy is the second law. It was given after the Exodus. And I think what Jesus is doing in the temptation is he's tipping his hand that his mission is a spiritual exodus. It's going to free people. And if we can grab a hold of the victory that he accomplishes on the cross, we too will be free, just like he's free. And we will be able to resist our enemy in the shadows. So here it goes. It says this. I'm reading from Luke's version today. Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit in the wilderness for 40 days being tempted by the devil, and he ate nothing during those days. And when they were ended, he was hungry. And the devil said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command this stone to become bread." And Jesus answered him, "It is written, man shall not live by bread alone." Verse 3 tells us that after a 40-day fast, Jesus is hungry. Okay, Captain Obvious, Luke, thank you. Obviously, he's hungry. But here's where the temptation comes in. The devil is using a temptation of comfort. And the temptation to Jesus is to provide for himself, to give himself comfort, and to care for himself. Now, church, listen. We too are tempted to comfort, to provide for ourselves what we are hungry for, to care for ourselves when we think nobody else is caring for us, to keep our eyes upon this earth and our physical needs. And we look into the areas of our life where we lack the provision and the care and the comfort. And you know what happens? We don't see it. And discouragement wells up in our soul. How many of you wrote down something where you are discouraged or you are distracted because you are uncomfortable? Because maybe you think God doesn't care about you. Or maybe he can't provide for you. Or maybe he can't heal you. This is the temptation of comfort. It goes on, the devil, verse 5, took him up and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. And he said to him, "I will give you all this authority and their glory, for it has been delivered to me, and I give it to whom I will. If you then will worship me, it will all be yours." And Jesus answered him back, "It is written, you shall not worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve." This temptation is very different. Jesus is tempted to lay aside loyalty, to receive from the enemy what is borrowed authority and a borrowed kingdom, and to worship that which is not God. All is a way for him, Jesus, to receive glory and honor and fame and recognition. All things that are, by the way, actually due him. This is the temptation of recognition. And church, I want to tell you, we too are tempted with recognition, with borrowed authority and power, with a borrowed kingdom, to worship that which is not God, even to set ourselves up as something to worship, with glory and honor and fame and recognition, to be relevant and spectacular and powerful. How many of you wrote something where you're discouraged and distracted because of a desire for recognition, where your enemy whispers to you, "You're never going to be anybody. You're no one important. You're never going to get that job. No one believes that about you. You will always be alone. Nobody even sees you." How many of you are discouraged or distracted because you're listening to those whispers from the enemy in the shadows? That's the temptation to recognition. And then verse 9, here comes the big one. He took him to Jerusalem, and he set him on the pinnacle of the temple. And he said to Jesus, "If you're the Son of God, throw yourself down from here." Is he the Son of God? Yes. For it is written. Now what's Satan doing here? He's quoting Scripture. Sometimes I wonder if Satan knows Scripture better than we do. He says, verse 10, "For it is written, he will command his angels concerning you to guard you." And verse 11, he's quoting two Scriptures. "On their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone." And Jesus answered him, "It is said, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test." And then verse 13, I love this. "When the devil had ended every temptation, he departed from him until an opportune time." This is where we get the language of retreat. The devil attacks and he retreats. But what is this attack about? What's the third piece of it? It's a temptation of control. You see, Jesus is tempted to presume upon God a test, a literal and figurative jump into what's next. You see, what he is asked to give into is actually something that will happen in his life. And the temptation is to go grab it and make it happen, to wrestle away from God's sovereignty and control, and to leap into your own plans and ask God to bless them and protect you. This is the temptation of control. In church, we too are tempted to control, aren't we? When we presume ourselves in a position to know our next jump and leap into the future, which God would surely bless and protect, because God helps those who help themselves, right? And so we'll help ourselves to our own plans, our own priorities, expecting God, listen, to either catch up to us or catch us before we fall. And how many of us are discouraged because we jumped ahead of God? And He didn't catch up to us. And He didn't even catch us when we fell. And like a concussed athlete, we just aren't the same right now in this season. How many of us are distracted by our own leaps and jumps to grab control of our future and base it on our own priorities? And likewise, we end up distracted by licking our wounds that we've received when we've fallen down. Now listen, I know I've just asked a number of difficult questions that I'm also asking about myself. Questions about comfort and recognition and control. You don't have to answer them, but you also don't have to stand against temptation. You see, it's a choice. We'll come back to that in a moment. I just want to pause here in the sermon and point something out to you that's very simple. What happened in Jesus' life right before the temptation? Doesn't matter which gospel you read. He was baptized. Do you think that's a coincidence? Some of you need to be baptized. We actually have a baptism coming up in just a couple days. Tuesday night is our annual Thanksgiving worship night. All of our campus teams come together, all of our worship directors lead, and we are baptizing people that night at our Wexford location. Some of you need to be here Tuesday night, and right now you need to take out your communicator card and you need to sign up to be baptized. Jesus was baptized before this temptation, and in that baptism, Jesus knew clearly after that moment who He was and whose He was, and so when the temptations come along, He was able to resist them because He knew He belonged to God. And that God controlled His life, that God would give Him recognition when it was time. These temptations did not mean as much to Him because of His baptism. Some of you lack that assurance in your life. Some of you have lacked the obedience to do what Jesus commanded you to do. Some of you haven't been willing to lay down that type of control in your life. And it's time. Now some of you say, I'm just not ready. I'm just not ready to be baptized. Well, then you're just not ready to be tempted. But we all know temptation comes every day. If you won't go down in the water, you will go down in temptation. So listen, if you haven't been baptized, take out your communicator card, and we'll make it happen. We got a couple days to get in contact with you, figure it out, talk to you, give us the problem of following up with too many of you, all right? Now, I want to step back in, and I just want to say this. Some of you haven't been listening well, and that's okay. I get it, okay? I've been in sermons before where there's a lot of stuff happening. I just want you to listen to the next 3 minutes. If you get anything out of this weekend, I want you to get the next 3 minutes. Your enemy in the shadows wants you to think this. Good for Jesus. He resisted the enemy, but I'm not the Son of God. And neither is this joker next to me. This story doesn't help me. It doesn't help him. And I want to tell you right now, oh man, it does. And that line of thinking is exactly what your enemy wants you to think. That this story is just for Jesus, but it doesn't apply to your life. And here's the key. Here's how I know this. The temptation of Jesus in the Gospel of Luke, it comes right after one significant thing. There's a baptism, and then Luke does something else. He gives us the genealogy of Jesus Christ. He tells us and goes all the way back to the beginning who all the ancestors are of Jesus Christ. And this is significant, so listen to this. I'm not going to read all 15 verses. I'm just reading portions of 2. So Luke 23, and then I'll read a portion of Luke 38. This is right before, like if you are reading in your physical Bible right now, you just turn back and here are the verses. Jesus, verse 23, when He began His ministry was about 30 years of age, being the son, as was supposed, of Joseph. And then it goes on. And it, for 15 verses, just names people. The genealogy just keeps coming. Okay? And then verse 38, the son of Enos, the son of Seth, the son of Adam, the son of God. What's Luke, the historian scientist, doing very intentionally? He's anchoring Jesus as a new type of Adam. And then he's going to immediately move us into a scene that we've just read, where just like Adam, this new Adam is going to be tempted in the garden. And will this Adam, Jesus, be like this Adam? Will the enemy in the shadows be able to lure Jesus to act independently of the Father and create another rebellion? Or will Jesus pass along a different legacy to the sons and the daughters of God? You see, Jesus in verse 23 is very different than Adam in verse 38. And I wonder, church, are you living here or here? Are you living in verse 38? Or are you living in verse 23? Are you living according to the work of the first Adam? Or are you living according to the work of Jesus Christ? This is the choice I was talking about. Your choice is whether you will live according to the legacy of Adam or according to the legacy of Jesus Christ. And here's the good news, church. We don't have to have the record of Jesus. We just have to have Jesus. He is the new Adam. The legacy of Adam is filled with discouragement, distraction, doubt, and deception. But the legacy of Christ, the new Adam, is that we all have to do is one simple thing: grab hold of the hope of the cross and focus on it and never let go. That's it. Now, let me show you a real working example of this. Many of you know that this series was originally written by Pastor Eugene Blackwell, who we call Freedom, Pastor Freedom. And he is our associate minister at our East End campus down in East Liberty in the city. And several months ago, Pastor Freedom was praying about how each one of us at Northway really needed to hear what we've been teaching, to get the same understanding of our enemy in the shadows that Jesus had. And then a few months ago, as many of you know, but maybe you haven't been around, you haven't heard this, Pastor Freedom was diagnosed with cancer in his left hip. And I actually sat down with him just a couple days ago at a coffee shop next to our East End campus and just had a bit of conversation with him. And I'm going to show you some of that right now. We're going to do our best to film a little bit more and show you some more next week with Kent. I just want to give you a heads up. He looks different. He's a cancer patient, and he's been going through everything. So his hair is gone. He's lost a substantial amount of weight, but he's sharp. And he has some things to share with us related to today's sermon. So I started by asking him how he's doing physically and spiritually. Here's me and Pastor Freedom.
Pretty well at this stage. You know, the beginning stage, man, it was kind of rough. You know, that's one of the Satan's attacks. But I'm just thankful first to God, you know, for the grace and the mercy that he has on all of our lives, but especially upon mine. And let me know that, you know, he makes us righteous. You know, because every once in a while you have your fears, you have your doubts. But I also want to just think that Northway congregation, man, just all campuses, just hundreds of cards and just emails and text messages and people really rallying around me, you know, even in my darkest days, being able to communicate and have that sort of communication. It was very uplifting. So you not only see the power of God working, but you also see the power of his people.
You know, last week when Scott was teaching, he explained to everybody that this 3-week series was really your idea. You came up with it, you know, probably 5 or 6 months ago when you first were in that meeting, all of us together.
That was a good idea.
Coming up with a series on the enemy. I'm definitely not going to write anything like that up on the board for sure.
We're going to do grace next time.
Yeah, a series about financial blessing in your life.
Sermon before I got sick, one of the questions I was asking, you know, during my role of the sermon was, what if, you know, the doctor told you one day that you had cancer. You know, and I was thinking about then is like, what type of distractions would you have in your mind? You know, when the doctor tells you have cancer, do you just give up? Or do you just go through the process to try to get the cancer over with and then come back to life later? You know, we were in Chicago, we were young, we were like to slap box a lot, you know, in the street, and we'd have fun. And it was just a game. But, you know, when the man came up and said, hey, y'all want to box for real? Y'all want to get in the ring and really learn how to box? You know, and I'm like, nah, I'm okay, because you know, I ain't want no big bruiser coming in and beating me down. But what I learned through this experience, you know, with our doubts and with our fears, is that God is saying, like, Christ already won the victory. I mean, Doug, like, he's already defeated Satan in the wilderness. He already defeated Satan on the cross. The kingdom was already belonged to Jesus Christ. So in knowing that the victory was already ours. This victory already belonged to, I'm not going to say this victory belongs to me. It belongs to me. It belongs to my family. It belongs to everyone who's walking with me at Northway. It belongs to all of us. So even though there may be 12 to 6 rounds of fighting, and some of the rounds, you know, I'm getting beat up pretty bad. But as long as I get back up into that center round, you know, the center of that ring, the next round, I know God has me. So it's just about not giving up, no matter how many doubts come into my mind.
You can tell you wrote the series because you used three of the words that you put in that document, you know, that we've been working off of. You talked about doubt, you talked about distraction and deception. So just what the fourth one that you talked about was discouragement. So tell us about that. How has the enemy been using discouragement, and obviously the Lord pushed back against that?
Well, again, as I said, with the Lord's strength, and with the people who have been surrounding me of lately, it really hasn't been. Well, it hit me a little bit last week when I went back to the hospital because my blood cells were low. You just get discouraged, man. You want to put your head down. It's like you just start thinking it will never end. In the beginning, you just want to give up. You know, it's almost like taking the faith out of you, almost taking the will out of you. And sometimes I just wanted to just lay in the bed instead of fighting to make my legs stronger, you know. But then God started showing me. He showed me through some people, you know, to start seeing that tumor go down, to start seeing Jesus working on it. And people began to pray for me. So I began to be filled with the faith and the less discouragement. But the discouragement is something else. It will really have your head hanging if you wallow in it. And sometimes, you know, Satan can trick you to make you think you're comfortable in it. And we can't be comfortable in discouragement.
Anything else you want to say to the community? We're going to see if we can get you filmed up for next weekend as well with Pastor Kent. So maybe have some more to say there related to doubt and deception next week. But anything else you want to say to the community this weekend?
Just want to remind them that this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it.
Thanks, man, for taking some time to
talk
with us. We're all praying for you.
Get to talk to some real people.
Some real people.
Not coming to take my blood or something.
Chocolate cake. Are you allowed to eat chocolate cake? No.
Don't show my wife.
Yeah, I'm sure she's not watching.
I'm sure she's not going to be there Sunday.
All right, thanks, man.
Thank you, man.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, wherever you're worshiping, just give Freedom a hand. He's going to be doing his best to make it to one of our campuses this weekend, so I think his wife is going to be finding out that he had some cake. Threw that cake down after we finished that shoot. Honestly, some of you have been asking, so many have asked, what can we do to help Freedom? Just be praying for him and his kids and his wife. And if you want to do something tangible, we're really just receiving gift cards for them at any of our campuses, so particularly to Giant Eagle. It's the easiest thing. He's just doing a lot of juicing right now and a lot of fruits and vegetables, and we don't live in Southern California, so they're pretty expensive this time of year, right? So we'd love for you to do that. You can drop that off at your campus. I think the key line for us was what he said right in the middle. Christ already won the victory. He already defeated Satan in the wilderness, and he already defeated Satan on the cross. And he asked that rhetorical question, right? He said, oh, when you get cancer, what do? Do you just give up? No. Pastor Frieda made a choice. And it's not just that he's not going to give up fighting cancer. He's made a choice that he's not going to give up fighting spiritual cancers like discouragement and distraction and doubt and deception. Those are the predictable tactics of our enemy who's currently attacking in his life and not retreating. And maybe the same is true of your life. Freedom has made a choice to stand on the truth that our enemy has limited power and no authority because he's actually already been defeated. Church, I want to end with an illustration from literature. Many of you maybe read Dante's Inferno when you were growing up, maybe in school. It's a classic work that walks Dante through different stages of hell. Just sort of a kind of an ethereal thing, just kind of a story, really. There's not a lot of, scriptural stuff necessarily. But there's this one part where he's walking through the gates of hell, and inscribed on the gates is this, as a person would walk through the gates of hell. Through me, it says, you enter into the city of woes. Through me, you enter into eternal pain. Through me, you enter the population of lost. Abandon all hope, you who enter here. Church, we've all walked past that gate. We have all known pain and loss and hurt and the abandonment of hope. And you must know that your enemy in the shadows wants you to be stuck right there in the legacy of Adam. A legacy that's filled with woes and pain and loss and a lack of hope, discouraged that there would ever be a way out. And you see, what I want you to actually imagine is Jesus, based on what he's done, actually telling you something completely different. Not something written upon a gate, but something that is written upon your heart based upon what he's done on the cross. Imagine Jesus saying to you, through me, you enter into the city of joys. Through me, you enter into eternal comfort. Through me, you enter the population of the victorious. You have discovered hope, you who welcome me in here. We're going to actually end our worship services at all of our locations very differently. It's why your campus leader has already given the announcements, while we've already done many other things. We're just going to take a moment and take our offering at all of our locations, and then we're going to have what's called an extended time of worship, which we only do a few times a year, where we're going to have just a few folks on stage leading in some quiet worship songs, and we're creating a moment for you to grab hold of Jesus Christ, to pray and to be prayed for, maybe at your seats, maybe up front with our elders, maybe even with some of our prayer teams. And in this moment, this is a time for you to get unstuck where the enemy has you, your enemy in the shadows, and instead sit and dwell and grab hold of the hope that is in the shadow of the cross. So wherever you're worshiping, your campus leader, your worship team, and your ushers are going to prepare for this next moment. Go ahead and do that right now, everyone.